Hi, everyone. So good to see you all. It's been a little bit of a break here in AI for Education land, but we're going to give everyone just a little minute to be able to come on and to join our session today. I'm very, very excited to have you all here. We already have almost 70 people. If you've been in a webinar with us before, you know that my first question to you all is to put where you're from, what you do in the chat. We love that because we have such a wonderful community that's been built around these webinars. I am going to share my screen now that that works. There we go. So everyone should see these lovely people that I have on my screen here, which I'm just very excited for. We have this webinar today that is very close to all of our hearts, which is this idea of authentic assessment. And we're going to establish what authentic assessment means through this work. It's actually going to be, we believe in building common language and understanding in our sessions. So we're going to spend some time really defining that. But I think of authentic assessment as really starting to create spaces in which students are learning in ways in which they will be doing. And it's something that it means something to them. And so it is something that is going to be powerful, not just within the classroom, but without the classroom and later on in life. And I am just so happy to be joined by such a lovely group. But as always, let's set the scene. Okay, so this is going to be a fun time. We already have so many people that have joined in the chat. We've got Egypt, Mexico, Canada. I'm in California today, Bobby. So there we go. We've got Moldova. We have so many great people from all over the world, and I just think it's such an amazing part of what these webinars have become, which is a community. The first thing is get involved. We want you to feel confident to not only say hello to everyone, but to share resources, best practices, ideas. If you have a case study of when authentic assessment has really worked for you, whether with AI or not, put that in the chat because this is your group as well. Like I wish I could see you all, and maybe one day we'll be able to figure out a way where I can also see you all. But it is such an amazing part of being able to share and build a community around the responsible and effective adoption of AI in schools. And so very excited. If you've been part of our webinar series before, we did 20 webinars in 20 weeks because I'm an insane person. And so is my co-founder, Dan. But we took a couple of weeks off so we had enough time to build out a rest of our year. And so we have a couple of really great webinars coming up. So we're doing a session on AI and supporting students with disabilities. We're doing one on the using it around AI and social emotional learning, which is super cool, with Margot Topin, who has just published a piece in Castle framework, which is super nice. We're doing a very practical session on using AI for differentiated instruction with Brian Eldridge. And then we're doing if you are interested in what's really happening within school districts in the US, we're doing a deep dive with district level folk around how they're integrating and implementing AI. And then the final one is super cool. I'm so lucky to have Tom Vander Ark as part of my community now. And so he believes that the one durable skill of the future is actually going to be entrepreneurship, which I think we'll be talking about today. So we're going to be doing a full deep dive into that on the 20th there'll be our last one of the year. So that's enough of me talking. And so I am so excited to be able to share with you an amazing, amazing group of just thought leaders, practitioners, people that live and breathe authentic assessment and trying to make schools better for kids. And so I want to introduce Annie. And we're going to go in order of how we're going to speak today. So we have Annie, Evan, and we have Aaron. Evan, if you had an A name, it would have been perfect. We would have been the four A's, but we didn't do that. We didn't get that going before now, but really excited to have you all here. So I always ask the first question, which is, so Annie, what do you do? Give us your background, but then also talk about that first time you ever used generative AI.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm so excited to be here and be with all of you. My name is Annie Makala, and I'm the director of the Scott Center for Social Entrepreneurship at Hillbrook School in Los Gatos in San Jose, California. I spend my days and evenings and weekends thinking about the way that we can amplify student agency and center youth voice and social impact work locally and globally. Our work at the Scott Center is tied to the skill set that we believe is going to be most important for future learners. And I am really excited actually to share the first time that I used generative AI. We are close partners with Microsoft and Kevin Scott, who's CTO at Microsoft and really the co-founder of ChatGPT. And 3 years ago, we had the opportunity to be the first classroom to pilot DALL-E 2. and one of my students, a
Amazing.
second, yeah, it was amazing. And it was a testament to like schools stepping into that risk taking and being willing to try something before it is polished and perfect. So one of my students, a second grader, had been talking to me a lot about ocean pollution and was imagining, wanted to be a change maker doing something about that, but kept getting stuck in these moments of like, what does it actually mean to tackle this massive problem? And so we used Dolly 2 to generate a shoe made out of plastic from the ocean. And it was a simple image, but it cracked open so much creativity, so much imaginative thinking. And from that moment forward, I was like, this is going to be the greatest tool for teachers, for students. And it's proven to be that.
That's great. And if everyone doesn't know, Dolly 2 is a text to image generator. So if you think about ChatGPT, those are going to be now even more, but usually it was text to text, although that's becoming more multimodal now, especially for the paid version. But what's great is that I love that your first use case, first of all, what a privilege to have you here, but also to have such a sightline into these tools, to be able to use these in practical ways. And I love that they listen to you as well. But how cool is it to have a kid's idea of what we could do with, sustainability minded, and then let's go actually create something that would be almost impossible for us to do, even with the best graphic designer, kid that loved graphic design or a artist. Like, how cool is that? So I absolutely love that, Annie. And then next, Evan, same question. Tell us about yourself and your first time using generative AI.
Sure. So I just want to start by thanking you, Amanda, and everyone at AI for Education for hosting and facilitating the event. A lot of work that happens in the background, so super privileged and really appreciate the invite to participate with us. And everyone on the call, thank you for taking the time. If you're an educator, you are by definition very busy, so hopefully we can make this time feel valuable for all of you. So my name is Evan Harris. I spent the last 10 years as a teacher and administrator in the independent school world in Texas and Arizona. Got my master's in private school leadership at Klingenstein at Columbia. And I'm now currently studying tech ethics at Stanford. The founder of OpenAI is actually our guest speaker tonight. So if you want to send me a question, I can pass that along. There are probably going to be quite a few, but yeah, happy to try. So today I consult with ed tech companies. If you've ever seen an ed tech demo, you may have gotten the feeling before that it's not always the case. There are a lot of teachers involved in creating ed tech products, and that can feel really frustrating to feel like there's this gulf between our experience as practitioners and kind of the products and services that get pitched to us. So part of my kind of impetus for wanting to get involved in ed tech was to sort of bridge that gap. My first prompt experience, I actually have documentation of because I went back into my texts and found my text to my brother on December 19th, 2022, which I can't believe hasn't even been a year, because it feels like this has been now here for years, and this reality we've all been dealing with, but it hasn't even really been a year since we've all been kind of dealing with this new reality. But I said to him, hey, have you played with the OpenAI chatbot? I'm stunned by what it can do. I don't know how English teachers and debaters are going to cope. That's what I was teaching at the time. This thing can write. I asked for a paragraph portraying Brutus as a sympathetic character with quotes, and I had it in 5 seconds. So this was before the trough of disillusionment. I was very much on the hype cycle with that first text to my brother. But yeah, that was my first interaction.
Well, Evan, I love that you say that like that's a pretty balanced approach. You already saw that first time, like how is it going to impact me as an educator, especially an educator that has most of our assessments in the written form. And so I think that that was something that you even like nailed on the head in that first kind of moment. Also, I'm sure I have plenty of questions for Sam if you want to take them. I'm not sure if you want to hear all of them, but I think that's so cool. And just thank you for joining us. And then finally, Aaron. So I just want to say, Aaron and I'm so happy to have you here with us. So we had intended to do this much earlier in our webinar series. And unfortunately, it became quite hard for me to manage, but I'm so glad that Aaron has been so consistent in the belief in this specific topic and just making sure that this is part of our webinar series. So thank you, Aaron. And just your first time with AI, and tell us about yourself.
Aloha. Feeling imposter syndrome being here and seeing everyone from all over the world. My name is Aaron Shorn. I come from Waimea on the Big Island. I come from Mersha Shorn, an educator, an artist. I come from Frank Shorn, an educator who would set up education systems in post-war torn countries. So it's in my blood. I am head of growth and community at Unruler, which is a portfolio and communal learning tool that Annie's using in her learning community, and many others are too. And it really is a beautiful companion because it's a process capture through multimedia, multimodality. I'm the Scott Center's entrepreneur in residence. I help to run Nalukai, a youth entrepreneurship program in Hawaii that's trying to re-indigenize and decolonize entrepreneurship. And I wear too many hats. And really, I became obsessed with AI as a world opener. David Dunbar, an incredible educator, talks about decay, or you don't know what you don't know. And AI allows us to kind of grapple and think in those spaces. And I first used AI to build a kind of bot that allows teachers to build out projects and project-based learning and map out milestones for their learners. And so I think project management is something that youth really struggle with. And I'm really interested in how AI plays a role in helping youth map out projects.
I love that. And I think talk about imposter syndrome. You have a pretty good resume, sir. And I think that the best thing about this community is that we come from all walks of life and there's no room for imposter syndrome. It doesn't matter if you are an individual teacher that is teaching and thinking about and grappling with these tools, or you are someone that is building for this space, or you're someone that is leading this work within a district. It's just really, really important for our voices to be heard, the same way that we're going to talk so much today about what this means in terms of like what we are going to do to support our students to be prepared for a world that is already changed. Whether we don't know yet what that looks like, but this is something that I think is really important. So thank you so much. So I have our first question is we talked about really wanting to create a common understanding. And so authentic assessment is a really interesting idea that's been, I would say that, you know, when we talk about authentic assessment, it gets talked about a lot. And so we talk about it a lot. And it's quite funny, my co-founder, Dan, it's kind of similar to design thinking, where he really has a kind of a question about what is really design thinking, because it's something we talk about a lot, but what does it really mean? And so I want to take this time to actually establish what authentic assessment means to you all as experts and practitioners. But I will say that when we built a new prompt for our prompt library for authentic assessment, and I tested this live yesterday in the session. And what I found is that ChatGPT did not know what an authentic assessment was. And so it wasn't something in which it could just do. Like, it really took a lot of prompting from me to get something that actually made sense for my meaning. And when we created the one we'll share, we spent a lot of time. It's actually much longer than usual. I'll say that again as an anecdote. Not only did it not know, but it's a much longer prompt than what we usually have in our prompt library. So I'll take that as like my challenge to you all is, you are experts and practitioners. What does authentic assessment mean to you, Annie?
Thank you. I love this question. It's something we think about so much at Hillbrook and at the Scott Center. And my answer is 3 parts. Authentic assessment is the ability to see the world as it is, imagine what it might be, and figure out who you need to partner with to make a difference for people on the planet. Hard stop.
Amazing.
That's
Love
what I
it.
believe.
I think you should say it again. Let's give it to everybody. What are the 3 things?
The ability to the ability to see the world as it is, imagine what it might be, and figure out who you need to partner with to make a difference for people and the planet.
I love that. And I love how it really is in itself procedural. Like, it is actually something that requires like steps. And so I absolutely love that. And so, Evan, not to put you on the spot after that pretty succinct answer,
Sure.
I would love to know what you think.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really interesting because my guess is that what you're going to hear from us might sound like relatively different kinds of answers, but that there's going to be a lot of overlap and a lot of common themes in terms of how we think about authentic assessment. I was talking to Aaron yesterday about this, and I think a really good place to start is to kind of talk about like, what is the issue? What is the glaring problem with traditional assessment? And Aaron calls it the wink. And I think of it as kind of a bad deal. And the deal is a deal that teachers make with students. And it's basically like, hey, listen, all I need you to do is cram this material. I will assess you on it only one time, maybe one more time if we do like a summative exam. That's the deal we're going to make, is there's not going to be any real transfer. There's not going to be no real critical thinking. It's not going to be durable learning, but that's the deal we're going to make. Just cram for it. And I promise I'll only assess you on it once. And teachers to some extent can be kind of forgiven for this because in part it's the way that we learned in school. And also like it can kind of seem, I think at least superficially, like the path of least resistance, but it's false economy. It's really not. So in contrast, authentic assessment emphasizes the production of a product or performance as evidence of learning, rather than just the ability to recall information. So we're prioritizing tacit transferable learning over just like factual explicit knowledge. Authentic assessment is often multimodal, meaning that learners have some ability to decide what kinds of artifacts they want to present and demonstrate as evidence of their learning. So there's a little bit of agency to that too. I think authentic assessment really hinges on effective feedback and formative assessments. What makes an assessment formative is that the learner has the ability to use that feedback to guide future performance. And the last piece that Annie sort of alluded to, and I think authentic assessment sort of takes some pages from project-based learning, which is that I think it is essentially outward looking. It's saying like, okay, we've created this capacity, we've created these artifacts. Now, how do we leverage it? Like, how do we get involved with our school community, our local community? How do we connect this to some bigger issues? And also, I think using a DEI lens, kind of how do we like center people that this issue most affects that might not be present in the classroom? So I think if you kind of put all those components together, you're getting pretty close to an authentic assessment.
Yeah, and so remember when I said the prompt was pretty long? It is a complex. It is procedural. It is mindset. It is the way in which we move past traditional ways in which this, like the industrial model is not 100 years old. It's a couple hundred years old, and it's something in which we have been creating, as you said, like a false economy of put this in your head. And then from there, give it back to me at this specific time. And that is not how the world works. Like we do, if you're in a job, it's not going to be like, remember how to write a business plan, but only on Tuesdays in March 21st. Like it's only going to be Tuesday, March 21st. You need to know that. That is not how the world works, guys. Hate to say it, but you're going to need to know how to do that business plan for that role forever. And you're actually going to be expected to be better at it. And to also to give others feedback on their existing, like, so we're moving past this idea of this incremental learning that is very low on Bloom's taxonomy. But I think what it's really interesting is that when we talk about it, like to Evan's point, is that this isn't just like a thing that we can replace. Like it is something that is going to require a significant amount of work. And we'll come back to this in terms of like the ways in which we think we can do that and actually speed that up potentially with AI. But I want to go to Aaron. So Aaron, bring us home. So what do you think authentic assessment is? I know I'm making it very hard for you, but you did pick, well, you actually didn't get picked to go last, but you are.
I mean,
Sorry.
first, everything Annie and Evan said, Evan basically just captured our conversation yesterday beautifully. I was a K-12 capstone coordinator, dream job at a school in Hawaii, managing capstones in 5th, 8th, and 12th grade. And I thought a lot about assessment. And I thought about assessment within the lens of communal feedback and feedback that is actionable, that isn't the kind of blink and wink game that Evan talked about earlier. I think when assessment happens in a relevant time period, when you're able to give it quickly, when it's communal, it's joyful. There's purpose behind it. It actually helps you with the thing that you're working on. And that 98% of school isn't that is like crazy to me, right? And for me, I'm all about the classroom as a collective. How do we have learners giving actionable feedback to other learners? That idea of zone of proximal development, that idea that Ron Berger talks about in Ethic of Excellence when he talks about artifacts of excellence. How do we get learners and their work to kind of be able to be shared with each other? I think a lot about metacognition. I think about, if you guys don't know who Kwaku Anning is, he's in San Diego, incredible educator and leader. Kwaku talks about the need for pause in creativity and the need for reflection. And then there's that great Dewey quote where he talks about experiential education is actually the reflection of the experience as well. And so I think allowing learners to be able to capture and showcase process is a core part of what authenticity in education looks like. And then it's just relationships, right? Like if we have an authentic relationship with our learner, if there's trust in those spaces, then we're able to give kind of an authentic feedback or kind of loop in that space as well.
Yes.
What I said, but more what Annie and Evan said.
Well, I think we could just we'll put this on to like, we need to come up with like a really great way to take all these learnings and pull it together in something that's fairly easy to understand, because I think the thing that strikes me is it's so rich. And I'm just going to call out a couple of things that I heard from you. The idea of joyful, collaborative, like communicative, like these and the fact that it isn't how schools work, like is and why not? And I think this is such a really interesting uh, question that is really important for us today because when we've been skirting around this in the sense of learner agency, empowerment of the learner. I would also say that as someone that does done this work around student voice, is that often when you have student voice, you have teacher voice, that those two things actually come in can. So when we talk about learner agency and empowerment, I think it also is a lot of times teacher agency and empowerment too, that these things go hand in hand. So now that we have generative AI, which is going to be like such an amazing transformative technology that is in its infancy. So we will be talking a bit later about the ethical considerations. But what I want to say is like, I want to ask, and I'm really curious about your perspective, is that why do you actually think it is important to adopt AI in a way that drives our agency and empowerment instead of reinforcing and or exacerbating current methodologies of assessing students? So Andy, do you mind starting?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the quotes, and I think it was Kevin that shared it, Kevin Scott recently, is like AI is the equivalent of electricity and the kind of the moments that we need to be able to understand how powerful this tool can be and how important it will be to our ability, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's in a future career, to amplify and boost our creativity and productivity. I think that is core to what I believe AI in the classroom is going to look like. I think the tool itself is going to just continue to evolve, and it's evolving so rapidly that any adoption of schools' approach to AI has to be fluid enough that it allows for the growth of the tool and the growth of students' agency in using it. And I love, Amanda, what you said about teacher. I would add admin to that as well. Like we've really tried hard at Hillbrook. One of the things we did over the summer was we brought a group together that actually spanned the spectrum of like really excited about AI, really fearful about AI. And so creating those spaces in your school environments to digest, unpack, and partner around this tool and make space for people that are sharing legitimate concerns, legitimate ideas of boundaries around the tool is important. And I think that's something that we're thinking about a lot in education. One thing that I love about the tool of AI and its connection to agency is it's an objective partner in learning. And so when you have a student or a teacher or an admin that is trying to work through something that feels really complex and really big, having a partner or a pilot and being able to steer the tool in a way that is right for you in that moment, that is not coming with judgment. It's not coming with, raising your hand in a full classroom of students and asking a question. That ability to see it as a co-pilot and as a partner in your learning amplifies your ability to get unstuck in certain moments, whether that's as a teacher or as a learner or as a leader. I use it all the time in these moments where I'm like, I just need help writing this single email and it's taking me an hour and I need it to take 2 minutes. Yeah. And I just need someone that isn't going to judge me for what I'm trying to do here, but I have this block. And so that's been a great way for me to be able to use it. And then when it's a teacher and a student using it together as this third party partner, I mean, the fun, I love what Erin said about the joy. Like I have watched a student go from being so deeply frustrated about a math problem or a paper that they were trying to write to within 2 minutes, making this massive shift of just being able to say like, oh, that's where I was stuck. It actually wasn't that I can't do it. It's that I wasn't using the tools that I have available to me to make steps forward. And so that ability to loop, I mean, one of the things I love about the work I do at the center is I get to see students from the moment they walk onto campus till they graduate. So I get to understand them as learners, as 5-year-olds, 14-year-olds, and 18-year-olds. And so that looping, I think Adam Grant has recently shared the importance of looping in education. That ability to loop with students and know, how they've used the tool in the past and how they might use it in the future and really help them see progress in micro moments and then in macro moments has been one of the most exciting moments of my career thus far.
That's amazing. And I think that this is why practitioner voices are so important to this, is that you're actually seeing the applications in the classroom. And so we can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. But when you see a student be able to move through a sticking moment, right? And to be able to do that in a self-directed way, I think is such a powerful opportunity for where this technology will go. I will say that I may push back just a little bit of this idea of objective. Unfortunately, these tools are not objective. They may have different they don't know a lot about you, so they won't get frustrated if you ask a lot of questions or those pieces. But these tools are still significantly built on existing biases, so they're I think it's just harder to see those in cases. Doesn't mean that like we shouldn't be pushing on using these tools, but I think that it creates that space in terms of having students even on those moments be aware that they should be thinking of this as a critical partner the same way they would be doing that of any type of resource that they have. So I really, really appreciate that and love, I want to be like, maybe one day I can come and actually sit in and see what's happening in your school. I would absolutely love that. So Evan, to you, sir. And so I saw a lot of head nodding, but so like, why is it important to adopt these tools in ways that really lean into learner agency and empowerment? Like, I know you care a lot about this, but what do you think is most important when we think about that?
Sure. I mean, I think, for any teacher on the call, you've probably seen at some point firsthand that when students are kind of the co-author of their learning experience, there's just more buy-in. So that's true for AI, and it's true for sort of the way we've been teaching for the last, however many years. I think that dynamic is especially important when thinking about AI, because AI, as you were kind of alluding to, is sort of holding a mirror up to our societies where we already have massive power disparities, right? And that means that we can be perpetuating those disparities if we're not explicitly countering them in our classroom practice. So thinking about power is actually really, really important in the context of an AI conversation. I will say, and this is maybe a bit more of like an Eeyore than a Piglet comment, but I'm kind of hesitant about some of what I'm seeing in the realm of like hyper-personalized AI tutors, which is kind of like the gold standard that X number of ed tech companies are chasing at the moment. And you might say, well, wait a second. So like if it's hyper personalized and they have all this power, wouldn't that be an empowering experience? But I'm not totally convinced of that, at least yet. And I worry a bit about it almost becoming kind of an infantilizing experience, because they're talking about sort of AI tutors as, oh, we're going to tailor it to your personal interests and your Lexile score and your this and that. The issue, I think, just from anecdotally, is that a lot of learning is kinetic and messy. It's collaborative, right? I think being pushed outside of our comfort zone, productive failure, those are all really important concepts for building learning, building deep and durable learning. And I kind of worry about like what happens when we spoon feed a bit too much. Like, can we overdo it with hyper personalization in the AI realm? But I acknowledge also, and I think this is important, that that's coming really from a position of privilege, right? So if you are someone in a really crowded classroom, or in a country, in a context where you don't have access to education, a tutor like that could be the difference between life and death for you, or the difference between being educated, not being educated at all. So I want to, sort of carve out that caveat as well, but just kind of push back a little bit on this idea and maybe sort of posit that it's maybe more infantilizing than empowering to have a hyper personalized learning experience, at least to an extent.
Yeah, and I think this is why this is so rich, is that we have learning science, right? And we don't always use learning science. I don't know why, but like a lot of stuff we do has nothing to do with learning science, but it seems like it does because it was done to us, and then we went to, grad school and we learned to be a teacher and they taught us to do these things and we went and did them in our classrooms. But I think this is really going to be something that is important for us to think about as we build these tools and understand these tools and implement these tools, is there really ever going to be a one size fits all that actually helps everyone? Or is it something in which, there are spaces for all different types of these experiences that we can do now in a more intentional manner? And so I'm trying to coin the idea of intentional innovation, but I think I'm just going to use intentional as much as possible. But are there spaces in which there is intentional messiness? There is intentional questions that can't be answered. There is intentional things that don't work explicitly, or things that do, that come as part of how we teach kids to actually be adaptive and agentic in their own experiences. And that those shift and move based on the context of the classroom, of the situation, and maybe it's not even a classroom. So I think that's where it gets really exciting, because we can start to unpick these things in ways that have never been possible before, because we can start building these situations at a fraction of the time that it used to be. already, even though it's less than a year. Okay, so Aaron, to you, why do you think it's so important to have AI adopted in a way that really empowers learners?
I mean, you told us not to look at the chat, but I'm in the chat, and
I know,
there's
and
this,
I told
and
it's
you
a
told
very
us
good
that,
chat.
and it's an incredible chat, and Vera's statement around that comes from the Department of Ed around AI as an e-bike versus a robo vacuum, right? Steve talking about hopefully it not replacing or short circuiting all of these processes that lead to really great learning. I think, the great Mike Yates, and if y'all don't know Mike Yates, you should check out Mike Yates. He talks about AI and ed tech in a dichotomy. AI and ed tech that props up the status quo of learning, which is not learner-centered, and AI and ed tech that allows for new things to be possible. And those new things aren't actually new, they're communal, right? They're how my grandfather learned and my relatives learned. They learn through apprenticeship, through craftsmanship. So I think AI is really powerful when it's a world opener, right? When it allows you to do that really beautiful detective work that is great research, to find new sources of information. When it allows a teacher who's not a subject matter expert to be able to aid a student in their project that is really specific to a space, right? It doesn't replace that mentor, but it aids and amplifies the work that's there. I think a lot about this Quincy Jones quote. He talked about when music and money are in the same space, soul leaves the room. And I think that's really assessment, when assessment and education, or classic assessment or grades and learning are in the same space, soul leaves the room. And I'm really interested in how AI can kind of challenge that idea. When AI shines a light on a status quo broken system, when it shines a light on an essay assignment that isn't rooted in empowering learners at all, but just regurgitating and repeating, it's the same way I used Cliff Notes when I wasn't vibing with that essay. Probably shouldn't have done it as a human being, but I totally did. I think that's what's really exciting about what AI can do. And when it's applied, when it's just a way to make teachers' lives a little easier in a really shitty system, pardon my language, then okay, it'll be relevant for about a year. But when it really allows learning communities to do competency-based learning or embark on deeper learning and project-based learning and all the buzzwords that we love, I think that's when it's really exciting.
That's great. And I think that this is just to say a shout out to Vera, who actually has helped create, she created the Every framework that we have around responsible AI adoption. And so just doing amazing work in North Carolina, again, as a practitioner going out to schools. And I think that these having these perspectives, Aaron, is so important because it is like Mike says, it really is right now dichotomy, and a lot of time ed tech just doesn't work and actually makes things worse. Or again, it's just like the best AI worksheet creator or the best, AI, just whatever we already do. And so I think that for shifting the conversation forward, is like when we talk about shifting from these ideas, right, of like what it can be and maybe the complexity of like what we don't want it to be either, that even the potential platonic ideal of an individualized tutor may actually be something that removes agency. These are big questions, but like I really want to situate this again and back into authentic assessment sense of like, where have you seen it work with AI? Like so I know that you're going to do a great job, Annie, but I want to know, and so does everybody here, like where has this worked already, even in this nascent stage? Do you mind sharing an example of that from your practice or experience?
Yeah, awesome. And if you'll let me, I'm going to share a place where it didn't work well as well,
Yes,
just to be
please.
as transparent as possible, which is that, I think I will say what I am about AI is a short-term pessimist, long-term optimist. And so I think there are ways in which we're seeing the tool work incredibly well as students lose space in their day, space in their brain for the creative, imaginative time to do hard, complex work. So that is where I've seen it work best. And we use it in our 8th grade social impact and leadership class, as well as our 9th grade immersive class. So one of the most magical things that I've seen it do is we were studying civics in action, which, of course, is a transdisciplinary class taught by a history, an English, and a design teacher. And one of the things that we were exploring in partnership with the mayor of downtown San Jose is, what is the future of San Jose going to look like? And so we had students use a brand new AI platform that created a 3D model of the city. It was the first time they realized San Jose is 6 times geographically the size of San Francisco.
Mm.
So the ability to go quickly from like all the things that they've studied in other cities may not actually be applicable to the kind of structures and systems that San Jose as a city is trying to embed in their work. And so, you know, we heard from many, many different kinds of leaders in San Jose. And the AI for assessment, the AI tools that I think made the most difference were the ability to really imagine the kind of future that students were trying to make sense of in their brain. And whether that was with imagery, whether that was like understanding the history of San Jose really quickly, whether that was prep for questions for the mayor or for the city planner. They did a lot of work in really short, quick increments that allowed them to have the kind of conversations with social impact leaders that they wanted to have. And so that it was really a conversation as opposed to a presentation. And that's time and time again, what we've heard people say about our immersive course is, you know, typically I'm used to going to a school and giving a presentation. Your students engaged in a conversation. And I think a piece of that, not all of that, but a piece of that was their ability to know how to use these AI tools effectively. Where I've seen it not work well. And, you know, this is my joy is like kindergarten and first graders. I spend as much time with them as possible because I actually think that is like the sweetest spot of creative, imaginative thinking. They're so unimpressed with the imagery that is coming out of AI tools because their brain is in a natural state of imagination.
I love that so much.
And creativity. And so, you know, I tried to use it on like a really fun kind of math problem set, and it was almost crickets in the class. Like I was expecting them to have the same reaction that my high school sophomores were having, which was this ability to like really quickly use the technology and the tool well. And so as a school, we're really considering the right ages to embed this technology and the spaces in which we want to make sure we have really clear boundaries. And I would say our elementary, our lower school education models, we want to amplify the imagination. We want to amplify the creativity. And when the tool can be used in micro moments for that, amazing. But really it's this tool and the assessment models built around it in partnership with Aaron and Unruler around reflection and around the ability, again, you know, to see the world as it might be, and then to have a real partner co-pilot in doing that. So much more in the stages of life where we start to lose our curiosity and our creativity is where I've seen it be really magical.
That's great. And I think that what's such a lovely example of this is that where do we use it in those micro moments where it's something that's like supporting around the edges, or even having the student realize that like maybe technology isn't that creative yet, which it isn't, like is like a really powerful piece that can be a little bit shiny thing when we get a little bit older. We're like, oh my God, Dolly 3, I can make 1,000 bad logos, you know, but I can make 1,000 of them when I could have made 0. Like we don't necessarily have that moment of like, wait, but we want, again, that this is we want this to be something that really pushes us or does something that we can't do in ways that are meaningful. And I think that the idea of micro moments versus it being something that actually drives students being able to like drive their own conversations and learning. I was in a session where students were given a card with 2 like, you know, questions to ask experts that someone else wrote. And I have never, in an AI session, and I have never been so frustrated at anything because what it did is it wasn't the kids' voices, their interest or anything, but it also absolutely took away their agency. And I think that that is an example of like maybe giving them just a little bit more prep time and space and confidence that they could do this. Like how much better would that experience be? But also wouldn't a better, like they'd ask a better question because it would be a real question. And so I think that I love that that's what you do. And I'd love to be like, I think that we all would love to be a fly on that wall. And so we're gonna go to Evan. We have about 5-ish minutes left. We're gonna definitely go over in terms of the time and on the more panel-y side, but please put in the channel any questions that you may have. And if you have to leave early, we will absolutely record this and share this with you tomorrow. But Evan, to you, like, so where have you seen this work? And if you want to also include where maybe it didn't work that well, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I'd love to piggyback off, you know, what Annie just talked about with the class not reacting the way that she expected. I had a really similar experience with my AP literature class, would have been like last December. coming into the class being like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see what they think of this. None of them had seen it before. None of them had used it. And just really curious and honestly having no idea how they would respond to it. And I remember one of my students said, I hate this. And I said, I wanted to know, I was like, why? Tell me why. I'm so curious. And she says, the first thing she says, I feel like everything has gotten so easy. And the second thing she said that I think was really interesting was she said, I have worked so hard to have a voice in my writing and the way that my worldview, and I'm not going to just give it up to this thing that can do kind of like, a B- version of my voice. And I just thought, man, if we could how do we reverse engineer whatever is in your DNA? Because that was such an incredible response of feeling such ownership and pride over one's voice and not wanting to just kind of trade it away to this thing. To your question more broadly, I think it's important to sort of not put the cart before the horse because, at the heart of understanding authentic assessment, I think really is having a solid grounding in learning science, right? There's no technological replacement for a teacher that really understands learning science. And I think the more that you can kind of firm up your understanding of those core principles like spaced practice, transfer, effective feedback, culturally and linguistically responsive pedagogy, and then use AI to support those things, then I think you're really building on a foundation that's really solid. But I know that speaking of concrete, that people who are in this call probably want some like real concrete examples of practical things that they can do. So I've got 3 really quick ones. The first one is I absolutely love. It's a product from Microsoft. It's integrated Teams now. It's called Microsoft Speaker Coach. That tracks like the pace of your speech, how many fillers you use. Filming yourself doing something and then reviewing that film is an amazing way to do sort of metacognition. So I'm a big fan of that as a former debate coach, really like that product. I would say too that, part of authentic assessment is that we're saying, hey, like don't do that quiz that just asks them to do recall, do puzzles and projects and performances and, videos and podcasts and in-class essays and case studies. That's a lot of work to put together and a lot of work to do all the directions and stuff. And I think AI can do a really good job of helping us ideate, but also come up with just the directions, like clear directions for all that stuff, because that's a lot of work that we wouldn't have to do if we were just doing a simple quiz, right? And then I think the very last one would just be personalizing journal prompts for kids, right? As an entry ticket or an exit ticket, rather than just putting 1 or 2 prompts on the board about The Great Gatsby reading.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
Having kids say like, listen, I'm really into sports. I'm really into fashion. I'm really into video games. Can I have AI create a prompt for me that connects what I'm already passionate about with my reading? And it's actually pretty good at doing that. And then they have some more agency and some more buy-in than they would if they were just doing a generic prompt.
Absolutely. And I think that like I see that over and over again, that just ability to just quickly and easily differentiate and like personalize around the edges, like an exit ticket or even a do now or a journal prompt. Like these are things that generative AI right now can do and can give you 50 options. And maybe the 50 options, there's a couple of really good ones, but someone's going to find something that sparks them. And I think that that is such a really beautiful way to take a very complex thing and start to incrementally doing this, because like this is the most important thing I think that we're talking about today is that there's a reason to do this. And you don't have to wait until you're the expert, like Evan said, on learning science. You may not be an expert in spaced repetition and everything and retrieval practice, but what you can do is you can start to integrate these things in ways that are meaningful to you and your students with very little effort. And so I really appreciate that, Evan. Over to you, Aaron. Same question.
I mean, if we allow AI to give us more time to do more human-centered, joyful activities that build trust, to build relationships and culture in classrooms, then let's use it for that. But let's not use it to replace what makes learning great, which is relationships, which is apprenticeship, which is the kind of craftsmanship of learning, right? And to me, to be super tactical, I've used AI in project management and teaching project management. I've lived in that kind of project-based learning space. And so for ideation, for research, for getting out that minimum viable product, that early kind of product that a learner is working on that gets data and feedback back, AI is fantastic. Allowing them to do more research, to calculate it, to think about if the research they're doing is actually right or is just, a shot in the dark. To me, that's the power of kind of opening up all of these worlds. And so much of the work that I do is connected to learners passions and interests and backgrounds, and then leveraging those skills and capacities to build something that's meaningful to them, that interacts with the world. And I think that's where kind of AI helps. It's remarkable how few teenagers or junior youth, middle schoolers, know what project management looks and feels like. Our learners, and this is my TED Talk language, have been colonized to put out perfect work. And it is deeply destructive to the classroom and to preparing them for life after university, right? Because that's not how the world works. And so because of that, they don't know how to reflect. They don't know how to embark on metacognition. They don't know how to get out, kind of smaller products that give them data and feedback. And so my hope is that AI allows for more of that time, allows for that culture to kind of be built in classrooms and spaces as well. And then we can, kind of build that out. There's an amazing Audre Lorde quote that I shared with Evan on our last call, which is, you cannot use the master's tools to take down the master's house, right? And when I think about system change and status quo change, I think a lot about these new tools that are in front of us. And I would just say, like, if you're going to use AI, have a companion that captures process. If you're going to use AI, use multimodality. And I'm biased here because I work for Unruler.
Use Unruler. It's amazing.
And like have some, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Unruler. It can be anything, right? Like capture process. Have them, Steve had something in there earlier about like, a narrative, a journey, right? That's an incredible skill for our learners to become storytellers of themselves, for our learners to be able to capture and have portfolios of who they are and what they're able to achieve. They're gonna need that in a future where product can be really easily created by AI. And so my kind of last word to everyone is capture process.
Yeah, and process, and I mean, like process goes so beyond, right? The idea of collaboration, moving from collaboration between people, between collaboration between a bot that's building a product that you're providing feedback to, like that process is going to shift pretty significantly very quickly. We're already going to start to see AI only talk to AI, and you talk about process. Like, how are you evaluating and setting up those roles and those abilities to evaluate? Like, it's going to be so important. So we come up on time, so we're going to do something. I have I just want to share everyone's lovely like, if you want to connect with us, which I am 1,000% sure that you do want to connect with us. It was definitely, well, to connect with these lovely people on the call that I have today, that if you want to, this is actually Evans, but we're all on LinkedIn. I know everyone here is so kind and open. If you want to reach out, if you're interested in learning more about what's happening at the Scott Center, if you want to learn what Evan's doing and ask Sam Altman a question as this proxy, or Aaron at Unruler, please do so. And then there are two things. One is that we're going to do, I'm actually going to get involved with this one, but if you have any questions, so thank you to Josh and Nicholas for putting questions into the chat. But if you have an example of a question that you want to put in, but my kind of speed round to everybody is, what is your one tip for using AI to support authentic assessment? And then I'm gonna take us home. I'm gonna actually demo the ChatGPT our new prompt, so you can actually, if you really want to just see an example that Nicholas asked about, can we actually see it? We'll do that as well. But do you want to start, Annie, with your one tip? You get 1 minute. One tip.
Great. My one tip is Behind the Tech, the podcast, and TeachFX, two very different kinds of tools. We're using both of them. Connect AI and entrepreneurship and find a way to have it be a core class in your school.
Yes.
Behind the Tech, the Will I Am interview is amazing about music and AI. So don't make this tool specific to a single subject. Understand it the same way we understand electricity, which is that it is fluid and in the day and almost invisible, but it is the thing that can help amplify learning in the classroom.
Love it, absolutely. And we'll put these examples of the Will I Am podcast and others into the email that we follow up with. So thank you so much. Evan, to you, 1 minute.
Yeah, so I think the thing I wanted to highlight is that, especially if you're joining the call from the United States, we've got some pernicious kind of stereotypes about who teachers are and who people in tech are, right? Like, we pay lip service to teachers a lot of times, but we also have expressions like those who can't do teach and stuff like that. And oh my gosh, if you work in tech, you're breathing this rarefied air, you must be so brilliant. As someone who's made the transition from schools into tech, this is so unbelievably backward. You have no idea. Like, you are capable of understanding the stuff. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert tomorrow, but if you are a teacher, you're an autodidact. Like, how often have you been just one lesson ahead of your kids, scrambling to figure it out so that you can then go to teach it? And I've been in rooms with people in tech where I think to myself, wow, if I was in a room full of teachers right now, we could have solved this in like 30 seconds. So I just wanted to kind of give that message that you are capable of so much, and that some of the messaging we have, especially sort of in the States, about these two groups are really misaligned with the reality.
Absolutely. Okay, Aaron, 1 minute.
I mean, my whole goal is moving learning from passive to active in every learning community that I'm a part of. And if AI can do that, fantastic. Use AI in project management, use AI in the beginning stages of a project for learners to do research, to think about ideation, pulling from themselves and ideas. I think our learning has to be human-centered and joyful. And I don't want AI to mess with that at all. I want it to just amplify it and kind of grow it in those spaces. There's an expression in Hawaii, makahana ka'ike, by doing one learns. If AI can be a tool that allows learners to do that more, that's fantastic. And then there's this word ha, which means breath, both in Maori and in Hawaiian. And I think like I want our classroom environments to be full of that breath, to be full of those kind of moments of joy. And I'm excited for AI to try to amplify and save time for that.
I love that. And I think that it's probably the easiest thing we can do right now is that we didn't get to the ethical considerations or limitations, but by far the thing that AI is best able to do right now is free up time for teachers to focus on what matters in the classroom, which is the relationships, the knowledge, the thinking that goes into creating spaces in which students are encouraged to push past their own um, ideas of their capability, because that really matters, but also just having that opportunity to really kind of deep dive and connect without being so like worrying so much about that paper you need to grade, or that email you need to send, or that newsletter that needs to be done, or that idea for your bulletin board if you're like a K1 or 2 like Annie. Which I really appreciate. So I'm just going to show like what our example is. And so if you know us, you know that like we really just want to be as practical as possible. And so we have our prompt library, which if you haven't seen, is on our website. It's free for use. It's for every single, you know, everything that you want to do pretty much. We have a prompt for it. It can be used we design these for free tools in terms of equity. And it's both a productivity tool, but also an andragogical and pedagogical tool. So this is great if you have someone in your school community that isn't very comfortable with doing this work or doesn't know where to get started. So every single prompt has an example that you can change the brackets to make it work for you, an example where you could just cut and paste, because sometimes we just need to see the possibility, guys. We don't need it to be perfect. We just need to see the possibility. And then we always want this to be an action of prompting, not a prompt. And so what we have here is like, make this prompt work for you. So other ways that you can make this work. So I'm just going to cut and paste this. And thank you, Callie, and our team for putting this together. We're always going to use a free version to test it. But what you'll notice is that we are setting the scene in terms of who we want it to be. We want to have a couple, like I like to start big because you're going to find the value of ChatGPT or a similar tool and like a lot of creativity or brainstorming. So like go beyond one. I want you to ask for 5 to 10. What we wanted to do is we talked a lot today about real world application, complexity. Like these are not simple yes or no answers. We want multimodality in terms of response. And we also want feedback as to the point that Evan made about learning science. We want it to be an opportunity to enhance their skills and demonstrate their skills. And so what we've done is we can go, and what we're going to do is here we have some examples of Maya Angelou in authentic assessment. So we have a character profile, a book trailer, poetry slam, a timeline, interview, podcast, an artistic expression. How fun is that? How interesting is that? Especially as a like that wouldn't be my modality, but I always get interested in teaching kids like things like I want them to be encouraged to do the things that maybe I know I struggle with. And analysis, like ethical dilemma, that's a really interesting one. I mean, for its time and date, it won't be appropriate, unfortunately, everywhere. But something like this is a really great start to start thinking about how these students can do. And if we notice that maybe it's not connected to Aaron's point about like the context we want to have it, we can now go back and say, I want you to now include more information about my students' experiences, or I want you to take like kind of 5 different students that might struggle with any of these, and I want you to craft one specifically for their interests. So if it's something along the lines of where they're, they are someone that is going to be really like the podcast is great, but it maybe doesn't quite fit because it's too big, that maybe it's just the intro for a podcast or something. Like, how do I take this and reframe it? You can either do that offline or online, but this is the opportunity. We hope you guys play with it. None of this is going to be perfect, but it starts to open up our understandings of what's possible. And none of this sounds crazy. That's the thing. None of this is crazy. And so it really is just taking the time and finding the right resource to be able to do it. So that was Nicola's question, and I hope you guys enjoy this prompt, and thank you again, Callie. But what Josh had a question that I'm guessing it might be for either. I don't actually know what a growth transcript is. Can someone tell me what a growth transcript is and how AI can help build that? I've never heard that term. No one knows. I I've never heard of a growth transcript. So we put Josh in the panel, they can say that. So this is something that I think is going to be really interesting. So I think we'll just kind of end on the idea of like, if you had one takeaway of like what you would want everyone to know, what would that be? And then we'll end today's session. And thank you everyone for joining. I know that this is something where we're doing a lot in a short period of time, but if you're really interested in the work that we're doing, there are plenty of opportunities to continue doing this work. But Annie, do you have like one final thought?
Yeah, my final thought is, getting again into the practicality of this, I would say, one of the things that we are doing actively is spending the first 5 minutes of every PD session on Wednesdays with our faculty to explore one AI tool. And just those micro moments, whether it's Dolly 2, whether it's a new technology that students have sent us, that ability to embed it in our professional development curriculum has been amazing. And then I think, I am staying curious about the future. I agree about being, what Evan said about making sure we're centering educators' voices. I think any practicality, any single tip that we could say today could change drastically in the next 10 days. And so the ability to have a structure in your school, in your classroom that brings up the new tools as they come to discuss and dialogue around them is going to be the most critical thing we can do in the next 3 years.
That's great. And giving the time to do it. There we go. If it's going to be important, you got to carve out time. You can't just expect people to be able to do that on their own. Next, Evan.
Yeah, so I was having a conversation with someone yesterday who was talking about their faculty training around AI and how they have these kind of innovators that are really sort of digitally native and experimenting a lot, and then people who are obviously, kind of struggling or maybe a little hesitant to adopt some of this stuff. And it reminded me that we already have models for differentiated instruction for the classroom, which are kind of like really high ceilings and really low floors, low barrier to entry for those people that just kind of need a slower start. And I think if we can use the mental models that we already have for stuff that works and apply it to the same kind of problems, that we'd actually be really well positioned to deal with faculties that are going to have a really wide variety. And obviously, I'm sure Amanda, and doing your PD sessions, you've seen the whole gamut of people where you're saying like, this person has never used ChatGPT before, all the way to, wow, this person might actually like know more than I do, kind of stuff. So yeah, we already kind of have models for some of the stuff we can employ.
That's great. And yeah, like every room I'm in has the same, like, never used it to use it all the time. Worst thing that ever happened, best thing that ever happened. Wait and see to like get run over if you're not on the bus. So I think it's very clear that like we don't go in with like a strong expectation of what people come with, but we actually take the time to understand that. And then last, Aaron, you're going to have the final word.
My first job in education was teaching digital journalism, and the magic was pairing students with mentors in industry, people that were doing the work. Because when I said something, they kind of listened, but when someone who's Kendrick Lamar's videographer or who worked for the Washington Post talked about video length, they actually listened, right? I think AI can be a subject matter expert in the beginning for learners that will allow them to find real subject matter experts. AI can be an amplifier of projects that will allow them to then take agency over a project. it allows to get over a friction point, which is sometimes impossible in learning communities. So when it's an amplifier, I think it's awesome. When it's a replacer, I think that can be problematic in learning communities.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I think that if nothing else, there's been a core theme of there is no replacing good teaching, good theory, good connections, and the space to create that. It's creating a space for students to really engage in what matters and what's going to lead them to being in a world in which they help shape. And they can help shape that from the very first day they get into school all the way until they leave. And so I just want to say thank you so much to our lovely, lovely panel of experts. Annie, first time meeting you, I'm such a joy, and I'm definitely sure that we'll do more if you're willing to. Evan and Aaron, just appreciate your thoughtfulness. And I just want to say thank you so much from everybody that joined us. We had 200 people at our max today, so just appreciate everyone. The recording will be out tomorrow. And wherever you are, I hope you have a great rest of your morning, your afternoon, your evening, or time for sleep. Just appreciate you all. Have a really great day and hope to see you again. Thanks, everybody.